Dale Noble.
Great guy, really love him. I see him every once in a while when I get up the guts to go down to Planet Fitness. He's down there quite often, and I served with his wife on the Opera House board. Yeah,
Dale was
super.
He moved here in '63, I think, because I was JV quarterback that year, and that was his first year coaching, and he was my first coach in high school. Was Dale Noble.
Yeah,
great guy.
Great guy. Still love him.
Great guy.
Yeah.
Mrs. Hoskins.
Oh, toughest teacher of the group.
She's probably my favorite high school teacher because of English Lit, and I had to build a Globe Theater, and she was my favorite teacher.
There's no messing around with her.
Oh God, she was
hard.
stern, but she was a great teacher.
Yeah, great teacher.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Doherty.
Oh, Gil. Loved him. Of course, our varsity football coach, and between him and Dale Noble and Boom Boom,
Forget?
No, what was the guy that always said, this way? Boom Boom Cantrell.
Cantrell.
Yeah, that's right. Those were our three high school football coaches, and
I had Gil for civics.
yeah,
Freshman year we had him for civics.
I think he was a good teacher, and
Nicest man.
He was. He and his family were just super people. He wasn't the Don York of football coaches, but he was a good football coach. Yeah.
Good man.
First jobs.
Oh.
My first job was at the switchboard at the hospital. I think that was the first one. Did that one summer. Then the next summer, I was back then. We were putting all the charts on microfilm. That's how long ago this was. So all summer long, I was doing microfilming, and then I started working in medical records, and learned to do the transcription and everything. So then when we moved to Chicago, that's what I did for 4 years, medical transcription.
What was your first job? Lifeguard?
No, first job was scrubbing floors at the family restaurant for Bob Gentry. Second job was washing dishes for Larry Dunham at the Midget.
Yeah.
And third job was washing dishes at the old Howell House.
Did you?
Yeah. I must like washing dishes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I worked at the cemetery for those 6 summers. That was great. Fun
Yeah.
time outside. It was
Yeah.
good
I
time.
didn't get the lifeguard job till after we graduated because you had to be 18.
Oh, I didn't realize
And
that.
not to report him and get him in trouble, but the old Masonic Temple here was the Ford dealership when we grew up. And on city time, we'd go over there and kind of rearrange things through Masonic Temple.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would work, and we made such terrible amount of money. When I became Mason here in 1970, Mr. Meyer would pad my paycheck. He would give me extra hours. It cost $15 a degree, so $60 total. And I'd get my paycheck. I'd say, Mr. Meyer, I didn't work that many hours. Oh, yeah, you did, Johnny. You got. So when I became a life member here in 2010, I came to Lodge, and I thanked the city of Howell for my Masonic
For that.
degree because Mr. Meyer padded my paycheck.
I love it. Well, it's interesting because back when I was real small, and I'm sure maybe you guys had this too, down in the basement here at the library, there would be people, adults that would come in and read to the children and everything. And I can remember the lady, I fell in love with her. Her name was Judy Davis. She married Don Penzien.
Benzene.
Yeah. And back then, there were a lot of ledges down around all the walls. And on those ledges were a lot of authentic Civil War artifacts. I mean, there were swords, there were uniform parts, things of that sort. Because the Grand Army of the Republic used to have their meetings in the basement of the library, and the descendants from Civil War veterans. And I don't know whatever happened to that stuff, but I'm sure it disappeared. It was cool, though, having these people read to us when we were kids. And the library was, of course, the central focus of our lives back then as well.
He used to have a dry cleaning business, and then he had broken his neck. He had a neck fracture. He was 16, and he spent 6 years at University of Michigan Hospital. 6 years in the hospital.
Without going home.
Without going home, age 16 to 22, so he never went home. He had 17 neck surgeries, and he eventually couldn't do the cleaning route, so he had a beautiful voice, and he went into radio. And back then, you had to have a degree from a radio school. He went to WWJ School of Radio Announcing in 1955, and you had to have a third-class license, you'd be a radio announcer. And then Dad would foster some of these people. Like our former mayor, Paul Streng, was a wizard in electronics, and he used to go out and fix the radio tower. Dad didn't trust the people doing the work. He trusted Paul to go out. But Dad took a lot of people and had them come to the station, got a lot of people interested in doing sports, broadcasting, things like that. We had the teen dances for years, and I remember 4 times kids would drink beer. They wouldn't go to use drugs. They'd drink beer, and the kids would get arrested, and Mom and Dad would go pick up the kid, pay his bail, take him home. 4 times. I was a little guy, but they'd lay him on the couch, feed him breakfast the next morning, and take him home. Those are the kind of stuff that was Howell then. You did it. People come up to the station, they showed an interest in radio, Dad would encourage them.
Hands on.
Yeah. And then if he didn't like a record, they just played, he'd just break the record on the air, and they wouldn't have to listen to that one again.
He let you sit in the room next to where he was broadcasting from and look through the window as he was, doing all of his broad. I remember doing that, being up there with you and Paul and things of that sort. It was quite an experience. I think it gave us all an interest in, what he was doing and how he was doing it.
Well, how things are so different today. I remember one time in about 60, Dad said, didn't know the mic was open, and he said, "What the hell's going on?" And he got reported to the FCC.
Mm-hmm.
They came to WHMI, and they looked at, they had that heap logs and everything, and they came to the station because he got a complaint against him.
Mm-hmm.
And all he said is, "What the hell?" Today, so what?
Yeah.
And many more words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dad was at University of Michigan Medical Center, and he had open heart surgery, and he had a rare type blood called AB negative, and he had, we needed 30 units of blood from the community to run the blood pump, the heart pump, and we got 36 units of blood just from Howell and Livingston County. And then he died, and his funeral was the day the 3 of us graduated, and Harold Shippy's Color Center got together a fund for me that paid for the first year of Albion College, which was very wonderful. And that was, at that time, $2,500. That was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But that was
Now it's more like 25,000 a year.
and it was a tough time because he died on baccalaureate Sunday. And then we had graduation. The only thing we could do is have it. We had to go graduation. But I had tremendous support from the community. That was great.
And is that one of the things that keeps you tied to this community?
No, I think I just always have loved Howell. I think it's having Mike here still, and Paul Strang lives here, and a lot of our dear friends. And we just had our 50th reunion, but we've always been close. It's just like a brother, and of course Barb is fortunate, and I'm fortunate. She was in our class, all of us together.
So that we know a lot of people in common, which
All
makes it really
common
nice.
people.
Yeah. When Marilyn died in '95, the outpouring of guys and girls that were in my class was just outstanding. It was support that you just couldn't imagine from everybody. I had people staying with me, bringing meals in and things of that sort. It just, you don't know really how good you got it until something like that happens and you see really who your friends are and what they'll do for you.
Round table at the family restaurant?
Yeah, a matter of fact, Paul Strang and I inherited seats on that, because our fathers had been members up there. And it was interesting, Bud Erwin and some of these other guys, it was just some of the old stalwarts of Howell, Cliff Heller. And it was interesting because Paul and I both, served as mayors later on in our lives, but a lot of the decisions were made at that round table in the family restaurant before the Open Meetings Act, and it was interesting to see how things worked, and a lot of the people in that era, the Cliff Heller's age, Bud Irwin's, those people, Bill Scofield, they really were cornerstones of developing a lot of things around town. Bill Scofield was really involved in the Parks and Recreation, the development of that department. Joyce Scofield was very involved here at the library. She was on the board for years here. Rick's on the board now. Rick Scofield, her son, is on the board following in her footsteps. but that group of people that age really did a lot. The Howell Boosters Club building the press box down there, and all the things that they did. If we needed some uniforms and the school didn't have money, they'd do some kind of a project and raise the money to get the sports teams what they needed. And it was just a group of real active people. People wanted to volunteer and be part of what was going on here in the community. I don't see a lot of that anymore. I see spots that still happens, but it's not like the way I classify it as it was when we were younger, and watched our parents being involved with all the different activities over in Ann Arbor, because that's where we were living at the time when I joined. But no, I came back, and when we moved back to Howell, I joined the chapter here, because Ann Arbor and Howell were always close as far as our JC chapters go. And as far as the volunteer thing as well, when guys became 8 years old, they joined the Cub Scouts and then moved on to Boy Scouts. There were 3 huge Boy Scout troops in Howell. There was 64 that was sponsored by the Methodist Men's Club. There was 63, Troop 63, which Jim Young was the scoutmaster of, and that was one of the service clubs. And then there was Troop 67, and Marsh Dayton was the scoutmaster for that troop, and that was down sponsored by St. Joe's School. And everybody it was kind of like a pathway. We joined Scouts, guys did. We played sports, and then when we got home from college, if we went to college, you joined the JCs. As you mentioned, the Melon Festival was their major project every year. It was just kind of a natural evolution of evolving process of where you went.
You mentioned, maybe it's off the topic, but you mentioned 67, in the year of the riots. Our class, Mike and I were blessed to be on a track team that was named to the High School Hall of Fame here. We came in second in the state that year. We won the Capital Circuit, the regionals, the court, everything. And we had some great runners. Pat Eaton, who's now gone, was probably the greatest track man in the history of Howell High School.
Hurdler.
He and Bob Anderson.
Hurdler, yeah.
But we had a great team, and I'll never forget, when I started college at Albion and Michigan State, if you were from Howell, you were known for 2 things, the Melon Festival or the KKK. That was it. And I remember telling so many people that's not how we were raised.
Right.
I remember we ran against E-Course in the state finals, and we lost by 6 points. And Coach Bibbs, who ended up at Michigan State, Hall of Famer, he was our coach at E-Course. And he came up to every one of the Howell kids, shook our hand, and hugged us.
Right.
Never forget that. So I saw Coach Bibbs years later at Michigan State, and I went up and said, "I'm from Howell, we ran against you." And he hugged me, and we both got teary-eyed, because Howell was not known at that time, unfortunately, because of a couple people. Howell was known as the Melon Festival, or you had the KKK. But running against E-Course, and as successful as our team was, he appreciated that. Mr. Bibbs appreciated our team.
Right. Well, it was great because we had great track and cross country teams here in Howell, and I think a lot of that is part of Zemp's doing.
Yes.
Bob Bloomer, who was our track and cross country coach, was one heck of a coach. And as John said, we got inducted here a few years ago, our senior track team, to the High School Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame, which was a real honor for us, 50 years after the fact, where, some of us couldn't even walk anymore, but we were great tracksmen back in the day.
Everybody's like,
Yeah.
what?
When we got honored at that, the athletic director out here, our 880 relay record had just been broken after 47 years.
Mhm.
And we ran on cinders
Yeah.
with long spikes.
Yeah.
And he said, you remember, these guys may be in their 60s, but they didn't run on the tracks you have. They ran on cinders.
Yeah.
And at night, with Zemp out there and your dad running the events and my dad in the press box announcing it, I remember vividly hearing the sound of those spikes on that track.
Yeah, that was the Boosters Club again. The timing and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And a shout out to Zemp too. Here's a guy that was just, I think, at every sporting event that we had, taking photographs and documenting things. And I know it happened to you. It happened to me after we had graduated from high school. you know, he shows up at my house and he gives me this whole stack of photographs of pictures of me participating in sports in high school. And I know that happened to you,
Yeah,
too.
I came home from Albion Christmas '67, and Mother said Zemp wanted to see you at the studio, so I went in. I got a whole packet of pictures. Did you have pictures of your father?
Not that I know
I
of.
thought medicine since I was 7. It would be people like her dad or Dr. Jacobs or Dr.
Dr. May.
May.
Back May.
You know, those are the people had big influence. When I graduated from med school, I took my diploma to Dr. Jacobs in May's office, and they introduced me the first time to this community as doctor. They took me out with my diploma. Pat was so
Into
excited.
the waiting room.
In
yeah.
waiting room, all full waiting rooms to Dr. Jacobs and Dr. But they took me out and introduced me as doctor to Howell. So those people had big influence on me.
I think as we've mentioned, there were many, many standout people in Howell, that Howell wouldn't be what it is today if it hadn't been for those people doing what they did at the time that they were here with us. You know, we had those people that did wonderful things and great things, and then we had our characters like Fred Server, you know, and people like that also kind of made the community interesting. I can remember when I was mayor, Paul Streng was my mayor pro tem. We were in the same class, of course, and I got elected in November, and my wife was diagnosed with cancer in December. So, you know, I told Paul, I says, we need to get a lot done in one term because I'm going to be a one-term mayor because of my situation with my wife. And so we really did it up well. We developed the first strategic plan for the city of Howell ever. We came up with the solid waste disposal policies. Lee Reeves and I started the DDA. There were a lot of things that we got accomplished. And the thing that was nice about it is that a lot of the things that we started but didn't get time to finish, Paul took up when I left, because of course Paul followed me as mayor, and I think Paul served G's either 3 or 4 terms, I'm not sure which, but it was great. And then somebody asked me, well, now that you're not mayor anymore, what do you want to do? I says, well, I got these issues that I need to deal with first. But they said, how about when, you know, things get better for you, that you think about helping us reacquire the Opera House. And so Jim Barley and I think it was Greg Clum and I, we formed the Howell Opera House Foundation. And this was after Shaw's had sold to the Morgan folks. And we tried to get the Morgans we told them we'd build them a place out in front of the high school out here, the freshman campus, and move their hardware business out there if they'd give us, you know, if they'd give us the store and the Opera House. And that didn't fly, but yeah, it was, you know, I was the first president, and to me, to this day, that's been one of the most important things to me, that we, you know, get that Opera House going and get it rehabbed and historically renovated and things of that sort. It's something that the community needs. It's something the community needs to get behind, and there's so much good that can come out of it.
You know, a big influence on me was Paul Bennett. And we think of Paul Bennett Field down here, but he was such a great leader of the Recreation Center.
Right.
And his wife is Mildred. I think.
Mildred,
Yeah.
right.
And they had a big influence on me as a little kid. He was playing Little League. He was always there at the field. He was a real dominant force in Little League, big time. Yeah. Well, his dad, her dad, the people like that, Jim Campbell. I mean, some of the people in this community had a big influence on me
Right.
as a kid growing up.
As I mentioned, you know, Paul hired Tom and I to be the lifeguards on the beach. Then John Hoyt, I think, took over from him when Paul decided to retire. I mean, we knew John Page, that Page Field's named after. He lived on the corner of Clinton and Barnard. we knew that's where the superintendent school, I think everybody held him in high esteem,
Yes.
and, you know, he was just, it was like he's the god, you know. Well,
Mike Hagman. Another pillar of the
yeah,
community.
owned the
Nice
gas station
guy.
right up the street
Yeah.
here.
City
Friend of my
service it
dad's, I
was.
didn't know Mike
Yeah.
really.
Daughter was a class ahead of us, Cheryl, and his son, I
And
think,
Mike
was
was a year behind us.
you're behind us, okay. But very active in the community. One of the people that we talk about as being one of the movers and shakers, I guess, at that point in time.
Wouldn't have a bicentennial history book if it were not for
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah?
Mike.
Yep. There,
I
we
didn't
just
know ours.
noticed, I don't know how long it's been gone, but we just noticed the other day that there are no docks. There's still the concession stand building, but no docks or anything like
Nowhere
that.
else.
Yeah, and it used to be when you got brave enough to jump off that high springboard.
Yeah. Was it a 3-meter board?
I don't know, it was tall because I
Yeah.
was little. I
That-
think I got brave enough at about 10.
We had huge swimming lessons programs down there.
Yep. And I took life saving
Yeah,
and
Joyce Carpenter, I think, headed them up. Mary Mislitz was involved. We had a number of them. We had life saving, and I can remember I had fun with the little babies. We'd introduce them to,
To
the
the water.
lake, and to watch them was really cool. But that's why we never got our pool in new high school, because we had a lake.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on Lake Chemung, so I didn't go to Howell
Yeah.
or off except
Yeah.
working at the
Mhm.
cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah, 16 residents in Sunrise Park when I was raised there.
Mhm.
Everybody else was cottages and came out for the summer.
Well, there was nothing between Howell and Brighton back then. There was,
yeah.
We only had 5
Jeff
year-round.
Bioviak was out there.
We only had
Yeah.
5 year-round residents living in Lake Chemung where I lived. The rest of them were all cottages.
Yeah.
There was nothing there.
You just lived, what, 2 houses off the beach, 3 houses off?
3 houses. We
Three
were the
houses,
4th house.
okay.
And there were our 4 houses and then the fence, and there was a little doorway in the fence so that we could get into the
Yeah.
park.
Yeah.
A hole in the fence.
Hole in the
Yeah.
Your
fence.
brother,
It's still there.
Yeah.
your
Noticed the
brother
other day.
when Chuck Arnold probably cut a hole in the fence.
Yeah.
That
Bob
big,
Rose.
big dock was such a pain in the butt, because when you were a lifeguard, you didn't want anybody under the big dock because you couldn't see them.
Yeah.
And, that was a pain.
Was my brother ever a lifeguard?
He might have been. It would have been before Copy and I.
Yeah, I'd have to ask him. Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's 4 years older than we
Yeah.
are.
K Boss.
K Boss, IGA. When I lived on Byron Road, Kay and his wife lived a couple blocks from them. They lived up on, what's the name of that street? The one that runs right to the hospital. Oh, well. But his son Ron was in our class.
Yeah, Ron was.
Yeah, and
I didn't know Kay.
he was a nice guy, really was. Ran a good grocery operation. The things like the sidewalk sales, which
Oh,
they
yeah.
really don't have anymore. I mean, every merchant had stuff out on the sidewalks. The homecoming parades were usually big with the floats and everything.
But Dad used to do a remote. You got to in front of WHMI and have a turntable with a microphone. And
Yeah.
in the first Melon Festival parade, I think was 60, I think. And he had a remote out there, and the parade lasted about 5 minutes.
Yeah,
It was,
yeah.
There were about 3 cars in the parade.
Pat
and they had
Down
little-
was the Melon Queen.
Yeah, and they had
Yeah.
girls wear the little brown uniforms, melon girls or something.
Yeah,
They'd
Melon
hand-
maids.
And
Melon
melon maids. And they'd
maids.
hand the melons out. Now they're
Yeah.
like $4
Now
or
they're like, yeah,
$5.
$5 a piece.
But Dad had a remote out there, and that was a big deal, because he'd cover it.
then we had the Shriners come in. The parades lasted like 3 hours.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah.
Everybody saying, God, I wish this would get over.
Traditions, Howell traditions.
Well, the Melon Festival and the sidewalk days. And
Yeah.
those are great times,
Well, we've made some new traditions too. The Balloon Fest,
Yeah, that's cool.
Fancy lights.
Fantasy of Lights, all, you got to keep on moving forward. You can't remember, or you can't forget where you've been, and you need to keep up the good things that happened then, but you also need to move forward and, develop some new traditions, and those are some good
Yeah.
ones.
But Howell followed me all of my career, basically. And I just cite one example. In 1990, I was in Grayling and Gaylor doing surgery as a surgeon up there. And a man came in, and he said, "Are you Johnny's boy?"
Mhm.
He'd been a high-level state policeman. And I had to do hand surgery on him. He said, "Are you Johnny's boy?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." When I got done doing his surgery, he could now shake my hand. And he said, "Johnny'd be proud of you." It wasn't me. He didn't say thank you to me. He said, he talked about my dad.
Yeah.
And it followed me through my career. That's why I guess because of Michael being here and the friendships we have, we keep coming back. Always will.
Yeah. It's great. We had, I don't know, what we have, 80, 90 people at our 50th
At our reunion, yeah.
48
that's-
classmates.
that's,
48 classmates, that's
yeah,
pretty good.
48 classmates and spouses, and God, the night before at Cleary's, I think we had
65.
65. I mean, it was something, but a lot of the people that came from out of town. A lot of us that were there are lifelong friends. I mean, we talk on a regular basis, communicate back and forth on a
There's
regular
some of them
basis.
I think that I don't recall ever seeing them any, like Martha Oakley I don't think had ever been to a
Yeah,
reunion.
I don't think so either.
There were a couple others that I'm pretty sure had never been to any reunion, so it was pretty special.
Yeah. Things, as I said before, things change, but some things stay the same, and that's good. The good things are good to have, and you take a look at the downtown's changed a whole lot. I'm really proud of the downtown and being on the National Register, our central business district.
And the historic buildings that remain, and that there are businesses in almost every building.
Mm-hmm. Transportation, I think, is a big issue. I mean, we've been trying to deal with that for years. I mean, back even before I was mayor, that was an issue, and it continues to be an ever-increasing issue now as the community on the whole tends to age a little bit.
Well, the traffic here is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
In 1960, my folks had a 59 Chevy, and I used to drive at 11 years old from Howell to Farmington to go see my grandparents in East Detroit, and there were no cars in the road. So I was driving a 59 Chevy, 70 miles an hour at 11 years old. Had the top down, and Dad would keep yelling at me because I was going too fast. So when Mike and I took driver's ed together,
Yeah.
we couldn't drive back then until you had a license. Remember? You couldn't even. So we took driver's ed. I've been driving since I was 11. He'd been driving since he was 12.
Yeah.
Fred Hill was in our car. Had been driving since he was 8.
Yeah.
So we got in the driver's ed car. Dave Kelly was wrestling coach, was our instructor.
Mhm.
We'd be driving with your hand on the steering wheel like this, and put the window down, radio
You
up.
said 10 and 2, 10 and
Yeah.
2.
But I couldn't drive today in Howell traffic
Oh,
at
no.
11 years old, run the expressway.
I don't even like driving
And
at my
no.
age.
But there were no
Yeah.
cars on the road. I wouldn't pass anybody because there was nobody on. 69 or 96 didn't go in until 60 or 61,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I started driving.
Right.
But we didn't have cars on the road.
Yeah.
Now I hate Howell traffic. I'd stop at Mrs. Spaulding's house, third grade teacher, to get something, lemonade or something. But I was 11, 12 years old, ride my bike over to Mike's, and then at the end of I'd ride my bike back out to Lake Shimon. But I've never gone Grand River. I had to go back. Golf Club
When I was
Road.
in kindergarten at Tooley School,
Mm-hmm.
we used to walk from Carrier's Grocery, a kindergartner,
Mhm.
up Grand River to Tooley School at Latson Road. I wouldn't think about crossing Grand River.
Well, we make fun of it, telling our kids, well, if you had to walk what I had to walk when I went to school, well, the fact of the matter is, we did.
Yeah.
There
There was no school buses in the city limits, so even out at the lake, I had to walk all the way to the high school.
Don't.
Yeah, we just stayed out until the streetlights came on, and
Because
then
there's
you
too
went
much
home.
of this going on,
Yeah, well, also too much danger for the little kids.
Yeah.
I mean, our parents didn't have to worry about us out in the neighborhood.
It was funny because I can remember we used to go on weekend trips, and so we never even locked the house up.
Yeah, I know.
If you lock your door, you're just going to end up with broken windows.
That I miss the most. Our parents.
Yeah.
And their values and the way that they handled things. It really was the magnificent generation.
Yeah, it
They
really was a
were.
different world.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you. Thank you so much.